QSO Today, episode 225, David Malin AA6RV. This episode of QSO Today is sponsored by ICOM America, makers of the finest HF, VHF, and UHF transceivers for every level of amateur radio operator. Go to www.icomamerica.com/amateur to find out more about ICOM radios. And by QRP Labs, makers of the QCX single-band transceiver kit, and now a new 10-watt all-band HF linear amplifier for the ham radio builder. Please support the QSO Today podcast by supporting these fine sponsors. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth for Z1UG, your host. David Malin AA6RV is a longtime listener and frequently communicates with me about the podcast in Israel. His most recent message was to warn me that professional podcasters do not mention the A word for the Amazon Echo as it sets off listener devices. Hence, the beep at the end of the podcast over the A word name. At the time of this recording, major fires are still burning in Paradise and Malibu, California. AA6RV spent over 20 years as the emergency coordinator for the city of Los Angeles. David has a lot to say about our emergency preparedness and training in this QSO Today. AA6RV, this is Eric for Z1UG. Are you there, David?
Yes, Eric, I am. 4Z1UG, this is Alpha Alpha 6 Romeo Victor. Hear you loud and clear.
David, thanks for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. Can we start at the beginning of your ham radio story? When and how did it start for you?
I really got two starts to my story. One was when I grew up in Whitestone, New York, to about the age of 14. And back during the Smoking the Bandit days, I got into the CB thing. So I did that for probably a year or two. And then there was a long break. Ultimately, I spent a long time of my career in the military. I switched from the Marines to the Air National Guard, and when I did that, I also changed career fields. Marine Corps calls it military occupational specialty. Air Force calls it Air Force Specialty Code. So when I switched to the Air Force, I became a ground radio maintenance tech, 4E1, E3, or back then I think it was 30474. And while I was at Keesler Air Force Base, I was going through maintenance tech school. Well, at the same time, there was a ham radio club there, and somebody talked me into, hey, you know all the electronics. As a matter of fact, you already have an associate's degree in this. Why don't you start becoming an amateur radio operator? And I was like, never really thought about it, and showed up to the club and quickly started studying the code, because back when I did it in '87, I had to you had to pass the 5 words per minute. So I did that and passed both the novice and the tech. The first call sign was November 5 Left-Footed Soldier, N5 LFS, out of Mississippi, right? Because that was back there. And then I kept that call sign until I ultimately passed General, Advanced, and Extra. Again, then I had to pass the 20 word per minute test. And then I got lucky with the Alpha Alpha 6 Romeo Victor. And that's been my call sign, and I've been using it for over 30 years. So I was licensed in '87, and then finally got this call sign in '89. It took me 2 years to get up to 20 words a minute.
Now, is AA6RV, is that a vanity call sign? And if it is, what's the significance of the call?
No, it's not vanity. What happened a while back, California, I believe, was one of the first areas to actually lose the 1x2s and the 2x1s. They were all used up. So we were the first ones to start issuing out the the 2x2, right? Because it's right. 2 letters, a number, and then 2 letters on the end. So when you start hearing the Alpha, Alpha Bravo, Alpha Charlie, I don't know what they're up to now. We were the first ones, and I just got fortunate with the recreational vehicle at the end. So do I have a recreational vehicle? Probably is going to be the next question, correct?
It isn't, but we can certainly go there if you want.
Not yet. I don't have one yet, but I do ultimately plan on getting an Airstream. And I've always, for years, I've envisioned.
Almost a sign of a retired person is an Airstream.
Correct. I figured it would at least make a good ground.
With a 3/4 ton pickup truck pulling it around.
Oh, you saw that. Okay.
My parents did the same thing, and my grandparents did the same thing. So it's kind of like, it's an American tradition. When you retire, you buy the 30-foot Airstream trailer with the 3/4 ton pickup to pull it around.
Gotcha. Yeah, I ended up I just bought a GMC 3500 Sierra Duramax. So I got the truck.
And you got the dog.
And I've got the pit bull, yes.
Right. So
she's sleeping right here.
so
Yeah.
you got the truck and the dog, and so you're almost ready for that adventure.
Right. Well, then the next thing I did as I'm going through this golden portion of the life, getting ready to retire in March, but I'm transitioning from Los Angeles up to Vancouver, Washington. So I went from basically a quarter acre with a small house to 3.5 acres on a much larger house.
So that's pretty cool.
I upgraded. I didn't downgrade.
Well, okay, so let's stay on the ham radio story for just a moment here, and that is so you've got this new call sign N5LFS, and you're in Mississippi. Did you have your own station, or did you build your own station there? And or when you built your first station, what did you build?
So really, believe it or not, I'm not too big of an HF guy. I am more of a VHF UHF guy. So the first radio I ever had, this will bring back some memories for some people, was the Kenwood TH215. Remember, it was that big. It looked like a brick. It had 10 memories. Oh boy, a whole 10 memories. And that was it. So I got into because remember, I came from the CB days. So for me, that was always fun to play with and be able to hit local repeaters. And, I would, matter of fact, when I would hook that up to my car before I ever had a mobile, I would do a mag mount on top of the car, and I would buy the speaker mic and I'd hook it all up. And that's how I operated for probably my first year until I bought a mobile radio and started hooking that up to the car.
So VHF and UHF was and is your primary way of communicating now?
Yeah, I'm still more of a VHF UHF guy. I do have some HF gear. I have the KX2 and the KX3. The way I look at ham radio, kind of the way it still is to this day for me, is I'm a prepper. So with me, when it comes to ham radio, I really like it for the ability of being able to be mobile, to be able to take off, put a kit together, have it readily available, and take off and go. So I would like to be able to just simply throw out a long wire or something like that, or use an Alex loop or any mobile antenna configuration, even the buddy poles, which I've got a couple of those as well, and just be able to set up and go.
Well, you've thrown this term out, and I don't think I've ever spoken to a prepper, or at least if I have, they never said they were a prepper. What is a prepper?
Somebody who has the ability in the event of a disaster to be able to take off on a dime and has all their gear ready to go. So so let's go through you got to kind of understand what I've gone through. Living in Los Angeles, my last job, I was the emergency manager for the Port of Los Angeles. Back in '94, during the Northridge earthquake, I lost my condo. I was literally homeless for 6 months. I had the ability, fortunately, because I put money away, I quickly bought a 36-foot fifth wheel, and I lived in that for 6 months. I literally lost everything in the house because the whole building shifted. The drywall blew off the walls. So here you are. One day your life is glorious and everything's going swell. And next thing you know, a natural disaster kicks off. Well, that changed my mindset really for probably the rest of my life. So from '94 till now, I've always had that capability of keep stuff in buckets. And when it's time to run, just throw those buckets into the back of a truck, grab the dog, and away you go. And it's that fast. I believe in being self-sufficient. Hence, probably one of the reasons why you saw one of the pictures I sent you was my solar plant that I just put in as almost one of the first things I did when I moved here. So I like the capability of having communications as a backup, having all the supplies that I need. Of course, you saw the gun safe, so I'm into that as well. I tell people I'm into HGH. Harleys, guns, and ham radio. Those are my three passions. So there you go.
Is that a prepper term?
No, because most people, when you say HGH, they think if you're into sports, it's human growth hormone. I call it ham radio, guns, and Harleys. That's it.
Well, you know what? It seems to me, because I've looked at some prepper websites, that preppers also practice. Do you practice in terms of making sure that you can actually deploy your stuff that's in the buckets?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you take the HF rigs, for example, because it seems to me that in a prepper situation, the local repeaters may not be working anymore, and you may have to rely on HF. Do you actually take the KX2 and KX3s into the field and make sure that they all work and that you actually know who to contact or where to go or what to do?
Not so much in that respect, but I do participate heavily with Field Day, which is the yearly ham radio emergency disaster preparedness fair across the United States, is what the way I like to call that. So do I belong to a prepper network with a bunch of other that I don't do. I'm not I'm not one of those tinfoil hat guys that goes to that type of extreme where I belong to a militia group or anything like that. Matter of fact, I would stay, as far as I'm concerned, I stay far away from those things. So no, I stick with my ham radio buddies. I moved up here because I knew there was a great amateur radio club, the Clark County Amateur Radio Club up here, W7AIA, or is it WA7AIA? They have about 550 members as part of the club. I immediately, as soon as I moved up here, joined the Clark County Aries group. So I participate with them on a routine basis. We conduct the drills. We're the disaster preparedness communications group for this area. And when you think of Vancouver, we are not Vancouver, Canada. We are Vancouver, Washington, and that basically you could think of as over the Columbia River. And we're the southern portion of the state of Washington.
You're right on the Oregon-Washington line, right?
I'm North Portland.
North of the line,
if you want to call it that way. Yeah, I'm North Portland.
North Portland, right? Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but as to push the prepper thing for just a minute.
Sure, absolutely.
Do you have plans to build an underground, like bomb shelter?
No, I'm not. Again, that's what I call the tinfoil hat guys. That's the ones that are going over the deep end. To me, I live next to 3 volcanoes. I have Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, and Mount Hood. My game plan, and I have that trailer right out in front of me. On part of this move, I have a 14-foot trailer. Did you ever see the movie The Accountant?
No, but I'll check it out.
If you're a prepper, this would be the perfect ideal situation. The guy has an Airstream with all his assets and a lot of the stuff that he needs. He could hook up in 12 minutes and he's gone. That's kind of the way I would be. I have a 14-foot trailer that I could hook it up to my truck. My truck is diesel also, that I could just plug in and go. So I keep a lot of the stuff inside the trailer, keep that in my barn, and if it's time to go, I hook up and away I go. There is no, if someone gives an evacuation order, and I'll give you the perfect example, you just saw the whole town of Paradise, California get completely devastated and wiped out, Malibu. They give you an evacuation notice and nobody has their stuff together. They don't have extra clothes, their medicines, extra pet food, any of that stuff ready to go in case of an emergency. We have community emergency response training. People take these classes, and even those people that took those classes, unfortunately, during this last fire, I know 3 of them that lost their homes. It's devastating. It can happen to any one of us at any time. The thing is do you have a plan? Do you practice the plan? Have you prepared for the plan? Or do you just talk about the plan and do nothing? And so with me, I actually, when it comes to that kind of stuff, I'm ready. If you say go, I can hook up my trailer and I'm gone. And I've got enough clothes to stay warm. I've got, I keep a little bit of cash on hand at the house always because, in the event of a blackout or something like that, the ATM machines might not work. So, but that requires resources, and I know not everybody can afford to do that. I'm fortunate that, I saved a little bit of my ducks so that I could prepare for an early retirement and be self-sufficient for quite some time.
David, do you recommend CERT training, CERT training for ham radio operators and maybe individuals who aren't ham radio operators?
Absolutely. It's probably so. Community emergency response training originally started with the Los Angeles Fire Department. A matter of fact, the gentleman's name who started it was Frank Borden. He's a retired assistant chief with LA City Fire. Still alive and kicking today, still, doing his thing. The program has become nationwide. You'll see those people usually in green vests. It's been adopted by FEMA. It really gives you anywhere from a 17.5-hour class to a 21-hour class of a basic preparedness. You go through stuff like disaster preparedness, triage, a little bit of medical, a little bit of cribbing, a little bit of how to put a kit together, coming up with a communications plan. So you go through a little bit of everything. Now, CERT is only 21 hours, of course. Then they got different levels of CERT. Then after that, you could start going through your advanced life-saving skills and basic life support. So the ALS, BLS, first aid, CPR, you could add on to that. And then, of course, some people get into CERT, and then they become the ham radio operator. The CERT process got them actively going from those MERS radios, those
Right.
general, from that, and then they go, well, why am I stuck only on these frequencies? How come you guys are talking on these repeaters? And then we tell them about amateur radio, and that gets then the next level. So I've seen some people become amateur radio operators first, and then take CERT later. Then I've seen people take CERT first, and then become amateur radio operators later. Which order is important? It doesn't matter. So long as you just continually, self-improvement is always a key to life. I don't care how old you are, there's always something that you're going to learn. And my favorite saying, my favorite quote, you know what you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know. And to me, that's that last one. You don't know what you don't know until somebody shows you something that you've never even experienced before. You don't know what you're doing. So to me, that's the best one. That's when you have that epiphany and that aha moment of, wow, that I'm glad I showed up for this training. I learned that little tidbit today.
Now, it's my understanding that ARES, or the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, recommends doing the FEMA courses, which I think probably include the CERT training, right?
No. It doesn't include the CERT training. So you're talking about now. I'll put my emergency management hat on. I did that for almost 20 years with the Port of LA. So I've worked for the city of LA for 33 and a half years. Well, I shouldn't say that. I worked for the city of LA for 28 and a half years, but for retirement purposes, I have 33 and a half years. So it's a little different. So when you talk about the ICS incident commands, the 100, the 200, the 700, the 800, the 300, the 400. Those are the ones they usually like to recommend. The first two, the 100 and the 200, that's really the introduction into ICS. One of them is a federal overview, and the other one, I forgot what the other one was. It's been so long since I've taught it. The terms I understand, but I haven't taught the class in a while, so I'm an instructor for all four of the 100, 200, 700, 800. I don't really see the need of people taking the 800, but they make that as a recommendation. The 100 and 200, absolutely, because you have to have an understanding of the general concept of the organization that emergency management is supposed to work in. I could tell you that a lot of first responder agencies don't even follow it properly. So, is it important that ham radio operators understand it? Yeah, because you need to kind of understand where you fall in within the scheme of things if you're working with any of the first responder agencies. And if FEMA rolls in, they're definitely going to follow the ICS process. So, that's the reason for it. Now, the 300 and the 400, that is really a higher level field incident command. I don't understand why ham radio operators even need to take that. They're not put, other than possibly maybe some of the leads, because there's a thing that we put together as part of the planning process in a EOC, and it's called an incident action plan. And that IAP and the processing cycle that we go through, that the 300 really goes through in depth of the planning P process, and it's where we show up initially at the EOC, we have a general meeting, and we go through a process where we create this plan and a process for turning over information for the next crew that's going to be coming on. Because you got to remember, most incidents don't just last your shift. There's a turnover period, and you have to put together this plan so that the incoming shift is briefed properly, knows what's going on, and can seamlessly transition from one process to the next. You also have to remember, if an incident happens to right this very second and you need emergency resources, they don't arrive as soon as you order them. It takes time. For instance, the fires going on in California, I'm seeing crews from up here in Washington that are going to drive all the way down to Malibu or down to Southern California and report to a staging area. And they're going to have to start taking over for some of the crews that have been working for a number of days. And that's how it works. How is that all organized? Well, it's part of that planning P process, working within the state emergency operations center and the local emergency operations centers that coordinate all that stuff.
And now this message from ICOM America. As we get past the contest season and into the holidays, it's now time to put an ICOM radio on your holiday wish list. So over the past few weeks, I've gone into a deeper dive on the ICOM rigs that you should consider. This week, the ICOM ID51A Plus 2 dual-band VHF and UHF transceiver is the perfect stocking stuffer for yourself or for the amateur radio person in your life. This portable rig provides new modes for extended D-Star operation that includes terminal and access mode, the ability to send and receive pictures over the D-Star network, and a free Android application that gives you extended features of this radio. The ICOM ID51A Plus 2 has all of the popular features that were found in the ID51A, including an integrated GPS receiver, an independent AM/FM receiver, and the dual watch functionality that you've come to enjoy. You can add a 32GB micro SD card and use the QSO recorder function to record incoming and outgoing calls. Forget your logbook? No problem, as this portable has an offline voice recorder mode for your important thoughts and reflections. And finally, even if you don't have a D-Star repeater near you, you can either use an additional ID51 Plus 2 in access point mode, or with a host of available hotspots connected to the internet to enjoy the D-Star network around the world. Of course, this little radio will work conventional VHF and UHF simplex and repeater channels as well. So if you're looking to have the most state-of-the-art and beautiful D-Star portable radio for a fair and incredible price, then check out the ICOM ID51A Plus 2 at your ham radio dealer near you, or go to www.icomamerica.com/amateur to find out more about this amazing portable rig. And when you finally make that holiday purchase, tell the dealer that you heard about the ICOM ID51A Plus 2 here on the QSO Today podcast. And now back to our QSO Today. I think that most people, even people who aren't ham radio operators, maybe the majority of people that live in Paradise, California, which sadly has displaced 26,000 residents, my sense is that the majority of people that live in these areas probably need some kind of training to even understand what to have ready in order to leave the house almost instantly in the event of a fire. And perhaps that training is lacking for the majority of residents of Malibu, for example. So do you recommend this kind of training for everyone?
That's the whole purpose of CERT. CERT is really, when you think about it, if you get to the basics, it's neighborhood individuals who have a little bit of first responder training to able to assist other neighbors. Because you got to remember right now, do you think with the fires going on that the local fire department is going to sit there and help you with your displaced home? No, they're too busy battling fires. I always my running joke is why I like I'm so passionate about it. I unfortunately in '95 went through an active shooting incident, and it was in a building that had Los Angeles Police Department officers in it, and when seconds count, they were a couple minutes away. And for me, that's another life-changing moment that I don't, though I work for government, we're going to do the best we can to help everybody when we can. But when it gets down to it, you're on your own. And so self-sufficiency is so important that, look, for the city of Los Angeles or for the county of Los Angeles that has 10 million residents, there are maybe 20,000 first responders total. I'm giving a rough number, but that's between fire and law.
How many residents of the LA basin are there?
I thought it was about 5 million, something like that. Yeah.
You're talking Los Angeles, but you've got San Bernardino, Riverside, Orange County,
yeah,
San Diego County, right?
Right,
so,
and then right. I'm just talking about Los Angeles County alone. I wasn't, then each county has their, and then geographics is a huge issue. How do you cover that much land with those number of responders? And hence you see the problem. You're having to call an aircraft, and then don't forget up in the Southern California region, everything's mountainous. So working on those mountains is almost impossible. And then you got the heat. So, your body can only handle so much.
Yeah, I think I heard that the Paradise Fire moved 80 miles in an hour.
Oh, yeah.
There's no time for anyone to respond, and for all of the agencies that are surrounding that fire. to get their act together while everybody's trying to get out of the way. So, well, that sounds like a great idea. In fact, maybe even those people that live outside of the United States, like me, can look online at CERT training just to understand what I should do. In the case we had an earthquake here or something like that, that could cause some major damage and displace tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, just type in community emergency response team, community emergency response training. You'll hear it called both. So if you just do that, you could go to the ready.gov website, and they'll have a site just dedicated strictly to that. And then you could sign up for a training. And then, next time you come to the States, you could take the training and then maybe bring it, ask to become a trainer. And then you can start teaching it in Israel. It's not just for the United States. It's for anywhere. So they have train the trainer programs as well.
When you were the emergency management coordinator for the Port of Los Angeles, did you have an active use of ham radio operators in order to kind of support your emergency operations there?
Absolutely. Oh, I'm glad you asked. That's a great question. Well, you did a little research there.
Yeah, I have to.
Yeah. So probably for the last 3 years, one of the things, and I didn't do it just for the Port of LA, I did it for the city of Los Angeles. I started once the city of Los Angeles hired a new general manager of the emergency management department who believed in amateur radio operations. He allowed me to start putting classes for city employees so that they would start getting their license, because we realized, look, communications systems do go down. Can it happen with the size of something with the city of LA? Well, my first job with the city of LA, it was as a ComTech. And I'm telling you, I know it could go down because I've seen it go down. And to have that backup of having ham radio operators that are ready, it's very important. The city of Los Angeles has, matter of fact, multiple groups of emergency comm people. They have ARES, which really handles the hospitals in Los Angeles. They have the city uses what we call LA Fire Department Auxiliary Communications Service. So we have LA Fire Department, ACS. There's still the RACES groups out there, and there's a few others out there. And then some of the other municipalities in the area, they have their own groups as well. So in that area, Los Angeles is huge, so they have a lot of different groups. But let's stick with the LA side. So I definitely saw the lack of city employees having their license. And what happens, there was a couple of us that started putting on classes. Now, the one thing that I would not do, my classes were always at least 9 to 12 weeks long, 3.5 hours a day. I don't believe in the weekend wonder class. I think that's one of the things that, as far as I'm concerned, really hurts the ham radio community, is these people that get the license, they get the certificate, and they hang it on the wall and they never pick up a radio ever again. I made mine more like a boot camp. As soon as you show up the very first day, I make everybody start writing down certain information. For instance, if I walked up to you the following week after you've taken my first class, I'm going to ask you, what is the offset for 2 meters? What is the unit of measurement for capacitance? What is the unit of measurement for current? And I make them write these terms down. And every week when you come in, I'll start asking those questions right away. What's the bandwidth for 2 meters? There's just certain things to me you should automatically know. So that way, after you graduate your class and someone said, as they're starting to learn how to program their radio, which I do a little session on that as well, which most classes don't do that because they teach it over a weekend. You understand the purpose of an offset. You understand why you have a PL tone. You understand those concepts. A lot of people that I see that take these weekend wonder classes, they get their first radio and they go, well, now what do I do? And, they're supposed to be sitting down with, I guess you could call them an Elmer. But a lot of cases, a lot of people finish and they don't know what to do even after that. I even have a session of, okay, well, where do you live? Okay, this is your ham radio club in your area. You need to go here and join that group and learn to meld in there and, sit there during a field day and let them put you on the HF bands and get you going. Don't just take this test, pass it, and you're done. That's the worst. That's like somebody, and I hate to say it, this is my other passion. Somebody buys a firearm, they fire 50 rounds at a blank piece of paper. They stick the gun back in their house and they go, okay, I'm ready. Well, you're the furthest thing from ready possible. So you're actually more of a hindrance than anything, because there's nothing worse than somebody that shows up during a disaster and says, I'm here to help. but they have never participated in any of the drills. They have no idea how to program a radio. They just show up thinking, I'm going to be here to help. But you see, the problem is when you show up with that skill set, that means now instead of me focusing on working on the disaster or doing the assistance, I have to spend time sitting there trying to train you so that you can help others. And we don't have time for that.
How successful were you with your graduates of your ham radio school and in terms of getting them to integrate into the ham radio clubs in their community and to understand how to operate the radios and then be an asset when there was an emergency?
Well, I got one of them that became in charge of the entire, what was it, Battalion 6? Yeah, I believe it's Battalion 6, became the lead person for our battalion. So the city of Los Angeles breaks it up by battalions for the ACS, and one of them almost immediately, within a year of getting her tech license, she automatically volunteered and stepped up to the plate and started putting antennas on her condo and everything else like that. You also got to remember, in California almost everything has an HOA. Not everything, but mostly everything. But it's been fantastic. I mean, we've got I probably in the 3 years trained about, I want to say, close to 200 city employees. I trained everything from a file clerk and janitor all the way up to, I had community volunteers. I had the consul general for Costa Rica pass my class too. So it was good. And they liked, I kind of train by what I call the shock and awe method. I'm not one of those politically correct, politically sensitive. That's just not in my DNA. People who know me know that I'm a really in-your-face type of person. It's probably because of my Marine Corps days. But it gets the point across. Some people like my training method. Some people don't. But you know what? That's why some instructors work better for others than others. To me, I kind of give it that knife hand Marine Corps DI thing where I'm right up there in front of you and kind of teach it that way.
Now, did you standardize equipment with your graduates? I mean, did you standardize on handhelds and mobiles in order to make sure that everybody understood how to program them, or did you kind of speak in more generalities?
I would speak in generalities, and the most part, I always try to sway people. I always told them for the longest time, the first radio you get is a good, handheld that has the 2 meter and 70 centimeter. Notice I said 2 meter, not the 440 like a lot of people do. If you're going to talk in wavelengths, talk in wavelengths. And then, I explain that as well. But my first radio I normally recommended for everybody was the FT60, the Yaesu FT60. That's always been, of course, they don't make it anymore, but it was a solidly built radio. It was 2 bands. It didn't have any of the digital components to it. Then if you wanted to go to the next step up, we would go over both DMR, the Yaesu Fusion, and the D-Star. Which I happen to like all 3 of them. I have I don't know how many radios up there, probably like 13, 14 radios of handhelds, just handhelds, not even my mobiles that I have sitting up here right above my desk. But that's we would go through that. But really, I taught the analog first because once you get your feet wet with the analog, going to the next step, that's pretty simple.
Now, I come from Southern California originally, and I still have friends who work for Orange County Communications. And one of the things that they talked about during the 1994 earthquake that you mentioned, and subsequent national disasters or disasters in the Los Angeles basin, which includes Los Angeles, Orange County, Ventura County, I mean, all of these counties abut with each other, was that there were problems with interoperability between the various organizations because somebody was heavy on Motorola and somebody used a different system for their area. What is your challenge as an emergency management coordinator for interoperability with other jurisdictions outside of Los Angeles?
Well, fortunately, California has really gotten their act together probably since then. We have an interoperability challenge. I think they call it Claymars. It's been a little while. That are supposed to be programmed in everybody's almost the standard out there is Motorola when it comes to 911 communications with the P25, and then they're going to narrow banding. So they created mutual aid channels, and they also do a good job of sharing their frequencies. Have you ever had the opportunity to take the COML training that's offered by FEMA? Is it by FEMA? I think it's by FEMA.
No, I haven't taken any training.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. So there's a ComOx class put on that you could get access once you finish taking the class for the state that you live in, and you will see all the first responder channels that everybody has. So at least that way there's the capability of programming. There is one group of radio channels that you will never be able to get, and that's because and this might become a challenge all the way across the board. Amateur radio, we are not allowed to use encryption, correct?
Right.
Right. Well, a lot of first responder agencies are starting to encrypt their traffic. Well, if you start encrypting traffic and you're going digital, now a local agency shows up from California, they're going to have their radio reprogrammed, because I can guarantee you a California responding unit that comes, let's say, up to the Washington area is not going to have the Vancouver encrypted radio channels. It's not going to happen. So somebody's either going to have to be just dedicated to reprogramming and reflashing the radios these guys come up with, or there's going to be an issue. And I don't think that's really ever been discussed, as far as I know, where I've seen somebody just sit there and starts reflashing other department radios. I've never heard of that happening. I do know the guy for LA City Fire, and I never really asked him that question because that wasn't my job. I always say stick in your lane, and the person that's in the ComL guy and the ComT guy, that's their job. They're responsible. The other way they would handle that is they have an extra cache of radios, but some of these new Motorola radios are about $5,000, $6,000 a piece. So I don't know how it's ever going to be ultimately resolved, other than we put in, especially a mutual aid channel that works throughout the entire state. So there you go.
It seems to me like with these big fires that are burning now, the Malibu fire and the Paradise fire, and hopefully I haven't looked on the news today to see whether or not these are contained, but you've got fire departments responding from surrounding states. How do you manage the communications, or the guys that are out on the fire lines? Maybe they're not all carrying radios, but how do you manage the communications? How do you make sure that there's interoperability between groups that come from out of state?
Yeah, that would be a good question for if we got one guy on from the fire department, from like the National Fire Service, who really handles for California, especially the guy that just deals specifically with communications. The good answer for that. I don't know how they deal with it. I've never really had the opportunity to deploy for a big national fire. My part was either the EOC and for the port. My biggest fire was a dock fire. So I had, I guess, they told me was a career event for some of these guys, where we had one of our docks go on fire for a couple of days, just kept reigniting. But I couldn't tell you for the big incidents that are going on, how they coordinate all that comm, other than I know they put together, in the logistics section, there's one person that is designated responsibility for coordinating all that and coming up with the comm plan. Who's going to be on what channels, and I know they have spare radios. That I do know. They might even probably start pairing up like a local guy with a outside unit, so that they do have the comm capability. They might even do it that way.
And now this message from QRP Labs. Well, Hans, G0UPL has done it again. QRP Labs announces a new 10-watt linear HF power amplifier kit for just $26 US. That's right, $26 United States currency. This power amplifier comfortably produces 10 watts from a 12-volt DC supply for every mode, including the high-duty cycle digital modes. This new linear amplifier provides 26 dB of gain from 2 to 30 MHz with a plus or minus 1 dB gain flatness over the entire range. This 10-watt HF linear power amplifier kit has no surface mount components to solder. There are a small number of transformers that need to be wound, and assembly requires care and patience. If you're a beginner, you can still do this kit. The push-pull driver stage uses two BS170 transistors in the amplifier found in the softwalk transmitter design. This final uses two IRF510 transistors in push-pull configuration. Yes, this humble low-cost MOSFET is really capable of excellent performance all the way up to 10-meter band and beyond. Hans says the short lead lengths and PCB layout are extremely important to the success of this kit. This kit includes a huge heatsink to prevent overheating even during a 100% duty cycle. Hans sent me a message that he tested key down for 1 hour at 10 watts full power with no forced air cooling. He tested again for 15 minutes at 20 watts, 100% continuous duty cycle with no forced air cooling. He even tested this new power amplifier with a 20-volt DC power supply into an open load, a shorted load, and various mismatches without instability, oscillation, or failure. So if you have a QCX or any other QRP transmitter and want to boost its output power with a highly reliable linear power amplifier at an amazing price, then click on the link in this week's show notes page to tell Hans that you heard it here on QSO Today. QRP Labs is my favorite kit company. It should be yours too. QRP Labs. And now back to our QSO. In episode 164 with Bert K60QK, he had mentioned Mount Lee. You sent me a picture of Mount Lee in Los Angeles. It's famous for the Hollywood sign just under the summit. For ham radio operators, Mount Lee had the first VHF repeater in the 1950s. Art Gentry, W6MYK, put that up there, and when I was a kid, it was called the MYK repeater. What's your relationship to Mount Lee?
So my first 13 years with the city of Los Angeles, I was a communications electrician. Now, I'm not an electrician. I'm a communications tech. But the job title goes back years and years ago, I guess even to the time when the Hollywood sign used to be lit up with light bulbs. And ultimately, they kept the name electrician in there. Mount Lee is one of the critical centers for the city of Los Angeles that has the capability of being a repeater site as well as a relay site for microwave. So it's not just for the city of LA. There's other organizations that have equipment up there. We have a gentleman, that picture that I sent you of where it says Sam Yorty. Believe it or not, I think back in the 60s, that top of that mountain used to be the Emergency Operations Center for the city of Los Angeles. And the other picture that I showed you where you see it looks like a air traffic control tower.
Right.
That's actually down below ground. What I didn't send you was pictures of any of the radio equipment in there because of the sensitivity of, I call it operational security.
So there's an emergency communication center underneath that relay site.
It's not an emergency operations center anymore. It's just racks and racks and racks of comm equipment. That's what it is today.
Right, and as I recall, Mount Lee is between the Hollywood Freeway and when I was a kid, they called it the Golden State Freeway. What is that? The 5 or? Yeah,
actually, so if you start on the northern side of it or the north.
From the valley.
North, well, yeah, from the valley. Okay, so if you're standing, there's one spot at the very, very end. If you did a 270-degree panoramic view, if you just picture you're looking straight. You start with your hand to the left. You're looking over the San Fernando Valley. Then you go past Burbank Airport. Then you're looking at Granada Hills. And then you start going over the Griffith Observatory. And then you start looking at Hollywood. And then you keep going around. You start seeing downtown L.A. And then you see all the way to Santa Monica. It is by far what I consider the most primo spot where I always wanted my bedroom.
Right.
I always said, oh, my God, this has got to be the best view in Southern California. And people aren't allowed to go there.
It's literally in the center of the city.
It's literally in the center of the city. That Mount Lee sign, when you're driving from Santa Clarita, you come out off the Grapevine, you'll start seeing that big tower. And then once you pass it, you go past Hollywood, then it's behind you. So it covers both the San Fernando Valley and Los Angeles all the way down to the waterfront, all the way to Catalina. It's really a premier site.
Now, I was looking online. It says that you're a member of the PAPA system, PAPA, in California, and the PAPA system is now in one of my DMR talk groups. However, I wasn't aware of this until lately. What is the PAPA system?
Well, we got to do a correction. I don't know which website. You got to tell me which website that is because I'm not a member of PAPA anymore because I don't live in Southern California.
Well, I thought maybe you might have taken it up with you on your hotspot.
Oh, okay. But I do understand the PAPA system. So the PAPA system is an independent radio organization, consisting of about 300 paid members, something to that effect. And they've put up both a DMR, D-Star, and analog system that covers all the way from right above Santa Barbara, all the way down to Tijuana, all the way out to Palm Springs. And they have about 13 or 14 repeaters. There's actually a website you could go to that'll show you all the repeaters and whether they're up or down. And so it's just a group that does a fantastic job of putting up, and individually maintaining all these repeaters for the entire area. Some of them are paired together. Some of them are, separate, depending upon what system you're on. They're linked. So it's a fantastic network of repeaters. Repeaters aren't free. A lot of people, that's right. I got to explain to folks that, you have to pay dues. Some people think that these repeaters, especially when they first start, well, I'll just jump on this repeater. I go, well, yeah, you could jump on. They allow you to do that. But if you're going to use it consistently, you need to pay. And the dues for that club are not cheap. The dues for that one, I think it's about $125 or $135. But then when you start,
a year,
they'll talk a year. When you start hearing about the cost of, well, you got to remember, they got to pay for the lease fees at some of these mountaintops. Some of them they get for free. Some of them they don't. Then there's also the maintaining and upgrading of equipment, adding on. They do a fantastic job. They put on a lot of good training classes. And these are the type of things that I try to teach the new folks to get into. It's like, this is a great group to belong to because you'll meet 300 guys that are constantly linking. And the funny thing is they rotate because it's so spread. With this repeater system, they'll have one meeting in the San Fernando Valley, then they'll have it down in Orange County, then they'll have it down in San Diego. But that's, because it's so spread out that way.
To include all of their members.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that way everybody at least has an opportunity to make it to some of the meetings. And they do great demonstrations and teach you different things. Somebody finally comes up with a Zoom spot, or I think originally I created, I was like one of the first guys with that what was that blue one, the DV dongle?
The MMDVM?
No. Mm-hmm. Let's go back. The first one, the DV dongle was the blue one, and then you had the red one, which was the DVAP. So that's going before the MMDVM. This is some of the older equipment. But that gentleman was the first one ever to create something, a third-party thing other than by ICOM for D-Start. Now everybody. Oh, there's so many of them out there. You got the Zoom Spot, the MMDVM. What's that new, the Hotspot, which is the new one? Yeah.
I have a new Zoom Spot, which I think is actually, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. It gets
a hard time knowing if it's amateur radio. I'm going to shake everybody's feathers, but I'm using it, and it's fun. I had it with me when I was traveling to my father's up north, so I could still be in ham radio coverage, even if it was just around the house.
It's ham radio.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
No individual gets to define what ham radio is. If you don't, I always like to say, if you don't evolve, you die. That's it. And see that's one of my in your face moments where it's like, look, tubes are gone, guys, for the most part. They're done. We got rid of them a while ago. Everything's going surface mount. Everything's going SDR radio. I mean, that's the lay of the land now. I know some of you don't want to let go. Look, I'm still upset that they got rid of the code requirement. Get over it.
Already.
You've left Los Angeles, retired early. You've moved up to Vancouver, Washington for bigger, cheaper, and cleaner, I think.
Yes.
What are you able to do in the new house that you couldn't do in L.A.? And what are your plans there?
So, new house. So you saw that big property that I have. Well, one of the game plans ultimately, as I do an extension to the garage where I put an RV bay in, you see that big lot off to the left that I have. That's going to be for a little farm array that I have a whole acre dedicated for that. I already put the solar system in, haven't put the battery back up for it yet. But one thing I had in Southern California, it took me 20 years before I was able to put an outside antenna up on my roof line just for VHF, UHF. They would get upset. And one day right before El Nino, that we were supposed to have that big El Nino that one year, I just decided to put up a J-pole. And the good thing is I had this rusty DirecTV antenna. Well, the amazing thing is when you leave up a rusty DirecTV antenna and then you put up a J-pole that's nice and thin, and I would ask people, so what do you think? They go, wow, you really need to take down that DirecTV antenna. It's really rusty. But they never saw the J-pole. And so for 4 years, I was violating my homeowners association because nobody ever saw it. All they ever saw was the rusty DirecTV. So I'm going to give you a link. Put in a hint. Put in a ugly looking DirecTV antenna off because usually HOAs will allow that. and then put up a very thin antenna, and nobody will notice the VHF UHF antenna.
One of my early guests on the QSO Today podcast, in episode 9 actually, was John Portune, W6NBC. And he had an article in QST magazine, I'll put a link to that, where you could cut a horizontal slot in your DirecTV dish, and you'd have a very nice working slot antenna on VHF.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that art.
So all of those people who are in HOAs where they allow you to have a DirecTV dish, you can cut a horizontal slot in it and load that as a 2-meter antenna, and now you've got a vertically polarized slot antenna and a DirecTV dish.
Well, I could honestly tell you, for the 20 years that I just dealt with internal antennas, the difference of putting an exterior, in this hobby, I don't care what anyone says, antenna is everything. You could have the best radio in the world with the worst antenna, or the worst radio in the world with the best antenna. And I'll take the worst radio in the world with the best antenna, and you'll do a whole lot better.
It'll win every time.
It'll win every time. That antenna is everything. When I put that outdoor antenna up, next thing you know, I'm hitting Mount Santiago, and I have a 5,000 mountain in between us. That there's no way, if they say VHF UHF is supposed to be line of sight, that I should be able to hit it. But I'm hitting it clear as day. Sometimes I'd even hit Catalina, and I'm in Santa Clarita. There's huge mountains in between us, and I was picking it up because I put and I use good feed line. It made all the difference in the world. It really did.
What's your interest in SETI? If we remember the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, it was the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. I saw somehow that you are involved with SETI.
Well, I love the distributing computing model, where whoever originally thought of this product.
We now call it crowdsourced computing, right?
Oh, is that what it's called now? I still called it. Yeah.
Where someone like Waze is using your smartphone to crowdsource information for the system, so that for the benefit of everyone. So I'm assuming that when you're talking about SETI, you're talking about the screensaver.
Correct. So you've got cycles of your computer that are not being used. So it's not just searching for extraterrestrial life. Originally they were grabbing radio spectrum off from Arecibo and slicing it up into individual pieces, and then they would do computer computations with other people's computers. And when you start multiplying that by thousands and thousands of screensavers, next thing you know, bam, you're getting information being fed back. So they're able to do hundreds of thousands of years of computations because of distributing the chunks of data to everyone else. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. That's how they were creating that big currency, is using other people's computers. It was a brilliant idea. It still is a brilliant idea. Mm-hmm. And it's taken off just from SETI. It became part of doing medical research for finding advancements in cures for cancer and for all kinds of things. So you can actually do searches for that, and you can run the screensaver and do that. So the first one was SETI. I've been part of SETI for a long time. I haven't ran it in a while. I think at one time I had 7 computers running it. Especially while I was at work, and since the computers were always left on overnight, I would set it up so that after work the things would just sit there and do the calculations, and then feed the information back to Berkeley. Berkeley was the one that was doing all that distributed computing, so it worked out great. So that's how I participated in it. I was helping out with research without.
Do you have anything running now?
No, now I sit there and I try to conserve energy. I'm retired.
You said that you've got this solar array now on the side of your house. Are you capable completely of being off-grid?
Not 100% yet, because that would require battery backup. So right now I'm using it to offset electrical costs. I will in the future. I just went, matter of fact, the other day to a seminar on the new Tesla battery pack that they use that hold 13, I believe it was like 13 kW of power. So ultimately I'll put something like that in. The battery technologies keep changing so fast. What's the best thing to put in?
Now, the picture that you sent shows 2 houses.
It's not 2 houses. One is the house is to the far right near the pond.
Right.
On the right, that's the house. Then the other part is a detached garage. And then a third structure is a barn.
Oh, really? Oh, I see. Okay.
I got all that. And then, everything that you see in that picture, that's all mine. It's huge.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, about
and
that.
then right, and then where you see the in between the two, I've got that open area to the right of the house. That's where I put the that solar array. So I did a ground-based system. I didn't put anything on the roof. So I got 2 meters. I got the regular service meter, and then they added a second. And the other reason why I put the solar thing in right away is because the state of Washington has a huge solar rebate
Really?
incentive. Oh, huge! It's going to pay for 50% of the cost for the solar thing
In 5 years?
over an 8-year period.
8-year period. Wow.
If I'm just moving here and you ultimately want to do it right away, because then over time it pays for itself. And plus you only live so long. So it was one of the first projects I hopped right on, especially while, the payback costs before it was about to drop. I forgot how much they pay me per kilowatt hour, but so far it's even though I'm in Washington in the summertime, I was putting out about 1,400 kilowatts per day.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Not 1,400, 14 kilowatts per day.
Yeah, the only thing about those systems is that because I know this from a friend who's probably listening, to the podcast here, and that is that when you have the ability on your computer to look at how much electric power you're generating, you go and take a look and see if there's any dirt or smudges or dust on it, because you know that if you polish it a little bit, you'll get a few more kilowatt hours out of it.
Right.
So it can make you kind of go crazy when you have to spend a lot of time noticing that if you just polish it a little bit more, it'll just make a little bit more.
Well, for me, it's cutting down a tree, and then all I do is I go out there with a hose real fast, and I hose it down. Plus, you got to remember, I'm in Washington, so it rains all the time and cleans them off.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay.
Right? I mean, that's one of the benefits.
Where you're at is unlike Seattle. Seattle seems like it's kind of dark and cloudy 300 days of the year. Do you have a lot more sunshine there?
I have a little bit more sunshine. I wouldn't say a lot more sunshine. Yeah, not a lot. I mean, like right now it's overcast. But this summer, my first summer here, I've been here. So I'm not technically retired just yet. I retire in March. I'm using up administrative leave right now. But ultimately, after March, then I'm truly free and clear to do whatever or whenever I want.
So you still go down there occasionally for meetings and whatever else?
Nope. No. I'm on admin. So it's like being on vacation. So no, I'm not going down there at all.
You're a collector of Harley-Davidson motorcycles. Do you operate amateur radio from Harleys?
I refuse to put an amateur radio on my bike. That's not happening.
So you're a Harley-Davidson purist.
That's these hobbies are, look, I do the crazy setup in the vehicle where I use the ram mounts to put the under the passenger seat mount, and then I have a pole sticking up that might hit the passenger's leg, and then I have a radio that's connected on this pole with multiple adapters so that I could swing the radio to my side. Or if there's a disaster, I could swing the radio completely out the passenger side and put a tarp and sit outside. So, I do that for the car. But when it comes to the bike, I want to listen to my music, because my Harley does have music. These are newer Harleys. These are not old ones that I have now. And I just want to listen to the music and hear the wind. That was the other reason for moving up here. It's just the greenery. Everything's green. No more. I'm done with desert. I'm done with.
Do you have the Harleys attached to the trailer so that when you pull out of there in a prepper moment that you actually have a motorcycle too?
I can take my Harley and strap it down in the trailer in a matter of probably 5 minutes if I wanted to take that with me.
Well, because it seems to me, as I recall from watching the movie The Omega Man with Charlton Heston, that having a motorcycle was pretty critical when, the zombies took over.
Oh, I'm not worrying about the zombies. I'm worrying about natural disasters for the most part. It would be fine. For me, it's probably the biggest, when you start. Well, let me hit that again. Part of my purchasing process, when I start going through of what I look for in a property, most people, if you're married, which I believe you are, your wife is going to tell you, we'll take this house because it has a beautiful kitchen, correct?
She might.
She might.
Right.
Me, when it came to me, the way I start is, first of all, every municipality is supposed to do what's known as a local hazard mitigation plan. It's supposed to be posted on their website. It will tell you about the hazards that exist within your community. So I use that as my baseline. So rule number one, I don't live within a mile and a half of a freeway, an airport, or a rail line, because they have chemical spills, things spill, and, that some of that stuff is very vile and ill, and, it'll do great damage to your lungs. So I don't want to be anywhere near that. I also don't want a neighbor that's right on top of me, what I call the tract homes of Southern California. That was another rule that I insisted upon when I moved up here. I like to be close, but not too close to a major town, because you want the availability of healthcare and all that, but you want that feel of being in an urban suburban environment, or in my case, rural environment, which I am. I have a well, so I'm not reliant on municipal water. I'm on a septic tank, so I'm not reliable on municipal sewage. I also insisted upon, especially on this move, no homeowners association, period. I refuse to live I would not even look at a house that had an HOA. And so then I looked at a few other things, which those get more political. So for once in my life, I will be political, and I mean non-political, and I'll stay away from that stuff. But I had like a list of 20, and my real estate agent looked at me like, I was the de-evolution of man. He's like, you can't possibly be serious about it. I go, I'm serious about every single one of those things that you see listed on there. And I go, I will not buy a house that falls within any of the hazard areas. So my first 4 trips up here, mind you, it took me 3.5 years to find a house. That's a long time of searching. When I started doing all this research, I would circle the communities and the neighborhoods and the areas that I'd only look for home. And then it's a matter of waiting. And one of the other golden rule was, I don't want anything that has the PEX or the, for plumbing, which is the new stuff that they use. I'm a copper guy. I like copper for my pipes. So, when you start going through all this stuff, it took forever for me to find a home. And then when I found this place, it was just like, most people go inside the house when they consider buying the property. I sat outside for an hour and a half just listening and looking at the view that I had in my backyard. That's what sold the property for me, not the inside of the house. The inside of the house, I'm still working on fixing it up. But that's easy. I sit there and, pull out my DeWalt cordless drill and start going to town, start repainting, and start doing home repairs. That's easy work. The hard part is finding the location.
What excites you the most about what's happening in amateur radio now?
I love the new digital formats that have come out. I like that there's competition now instead of just being only one with D-Star. I wish Fusion would have come out earlier, so it would have been more on equal par. But it's gaining traction. I love the software-defined radios. I have both the KX2 and the KX3 because why? They're great prepper radios, easy portable, easy to transport. That's the kind of stuff I really like. I like the ability to be able to take stuff, put it in a box, and be able to carry it with me anywhere I go and then set up. So I do like the whole idea of SOTA. The only issue is I sometimes have really bad back days. I had my lower back fused probably around my mid-30s, so that kind of does some limitations. I'm doing, rehab on stuff constantly. I'm usually good hiking for long distances so long as I don't stop. The problem is if I just stand there for 5 minutes, I could be in agony at times. So moving is fine, stopping is bad. So
yeah, but a guy like you, it seems to me, David, that you could, put the KX2 and an Alex loop and stuff in a backpack and put it on the Harley and use the Harley to get you to the top of the hill.
I got a little issue. To me, SOTA should be you have to hike there.
I break the rules. It seems to me if you have a bad back and you've got a Harley that you can break the rules.
Yeah, I know. But you're right. I mean, it's funny because like one of the first rides that I did the first ride I did when I moved here was to Mount Hood. The second ride was to Mount Adams. The one I haven't done yet is Mount St. Helens, which is really, when I look out my backyard, if these trees were in the way, I'd be able to see it if it was a sunny day. I think I'm only about 38 miles from Mount St. Helens.
What advice would you give to new or returning hams?
Well, 1, become active. 2, join especially new one, join a club. Absolutely join a club. That to me is really the only thing that's really going to get you really activated into this hobby. I rarely see somebody that just starts doing it on their own and starts communicating. Finding a good club is important. You don't have to necessarily join the one that's local by you. I like the ones that probably have more members than before. I was the past president for the Santa Clarita Amateur Radio Club, and we were a small club. But, surrounding the area, you had the San Fernando Valley Amateur Radio Club. You have the Agua Dulce Amateur Radio Club. So, yeah, Burbank. They exist everywhere. It's just a matter of you seeking them out and finding them and, getting together with other hams and learning about the hobby.
David, I want to thank you for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. This is a lot of fun. And I knew that I'll say in the introduction, how it is that we became acquainted.
Yeah, I think it had to do with me yelling at you about quit saying the A word.
the A word. So anybody listening to the very end of the podcast lately will know that I bleep out the A word so that everyone's A devices won't start talking at the same time.
Right. But I've been contacting with you for quite some time, over stuff, and just, I love you. I've always liked I think my favorite one that you did was with I forgot the gentleman's name, but it's one of the real early ones. Jim Blanchard. He was the guy that did the soda hiking and he did the Appalachian Trail. Yeah, and he was another Keesler Air Force Base guy. That he was and I read his. I don't know if you ever read his book.
I did.
It was a fantastic read of. That's one of the things I would love to do, but I seriously have concerns of, what happens if my back goes out during that hike? What do I do?
Well, that's the Appalachian Trail is also a trip that you start. I think you started in February in the south, and it isn't until October that you actually get to the to the other end. So
correct
in Maine,
yes,
just as the snow is starting to flurry. So it's a huge commitment, not only in time but physical resources and stuff. And as you recall, I think that Jim had a coronary bypass in the middle of this trip.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so it's a big commitment, but it's a cool idea. The whole idea of lying in a hammock between the trees off the trail with an Altoid scan transceiver.
Right. That's right. Because of him, I bought one of those Hennessy hammocks. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, no, it's just an amazing idea. I just have to convince the XYL that's a project I should do. In Israel, we have the Israel Trail, which also starts at at one end of the country and goes all the way down to the south end of the country.
I think if you look at your emails way back, I contacted you about that.
Oh, yeah. So that would be interesting too, but I must tell you that the Israel Trail, unlike the Appalachian Trail, does not have trees that you can hang a hammock. So,
right.
So that's a different user experience. Well, David, I want to thank you again for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. A lot of fun. Thanks again. Thanks so much. 73.
73 is Eric. Take care.
That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with David. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in AA6RV in the search box at the top of the page. My thanks to both ICOM America and QRP Labs for their support of the QSO Today podcast. Please show your support of these fine sponsors by clicking on their links in the show notes pages, or when you make your purchases, that you say that you heard it here on QSO Today. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any of the other episodes into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing the subscribe buttons on the show notes pages. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes page. I am grateful for any way that you show appreciation and support. It makes a big difference. QSO Today is now available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Libsyn, and TuneIn, as well as the iTunes Store. If you own an Amazon Echo, you can say, "Beep, play the QSO Today podcast from TuneIn." I still use Stitcher to listen to podcasts on my smartphone. The links to all of these services are on the show notes pages on the right side. Until next time, this is Eric for Z1UG 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.